right, I know some attendees are making their way into the Zoom session. So we'll wait maybe 15, 20 seconds and then we'll get rolling. All right, so hello and welcome to tonight's session called Meet the Middle School Faculty. My name is Mary Brown and I'm the Director of Middle and Upper School Enrollment here at Catlin Gable. I also want to extend a warm welcome to those fifth grade families from Catlin Gable who've tuned in for this afternoon and this evening's presentations. We hope all of you find tonight's back-to-back 30-minute sessions featuring our 7 academic departments informative. The faculty from each department will introduce themselves, share with you an overview of their philosophy, curriculum, and goals. And then the last half of the session, you'll have the opportunity to post questions in the chat, and Ted, the head of the middle school, will moderate those questions. In fact, as you think of questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. We will just wait until the last 10 minutes or so to answer those questions. As a reminder, tonight's session is being recorded, and we will post the recordings on our website in the next week or two. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ted Chen, head of our middle school, who will welcome our first department.
Great, thank you, Mary. Welcome, everybody. I'm very excited that you all are joining us live, or if you're tuning in and watching the recording later, thanks for doing so. So our first department that you will hear from will have representatives of our modern language department in the middle school. And as Mary said, they will introduce themselves, share a little bit of their background, and talk a little bit about the modern language curriculum and philosophy. And then we'll end with a little bit of Q&A at the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our 2 representatives right now. And we have a third one who just joined. And here we go. Take it away, Modern Languages.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Spence Newhouse. I am 6th and 7th grade Spanish teacher. I think Spencer's going to get us started, but maybe Tien will want to introduce herself as well before we get started.
Hi, my name is Tien White, and I'm teaching 7th and 8th grade Chinese class. This is my 7 years with Catlin Gable, and welcome to our virtual open house.
And hi, everybody. I'm Spencer White. It's a pleasure to not necessarily see you, but to talk with you this evening. I've been teaching at Catlin for about 25 years, Spanish in middle and high school. It's a pleasure to have you. And as Laura said, I will be kicking things off tonight. And Ted, if you would give me screen share permission, perhaps I have that already.
You should be able to screen share. Yeah.
Great, fabulous. Here we go then. Let me go ahead and press play on this. A little idea of who we are. What I want to introduce is a really high altitude view of how we think about teaching modern languages at Catlin Gable in general. And the way to do that is by sharing this visual with you. This is what we call the actful pyramid of proficiency. And still in common lexicon these days, you hear people ask about fluency. What is your fluency in language? How fluent might you be? And that word for us really just means how quickly a language comes out of you, either written or spoken. And the word that we talk about and banter around a lot in the modern language department is proficiency. And proficiency is this notion of what tasks can you satisfy? What can you do with a language in practice? And the ACTFL, the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, has put together an internationally recognized roadmap, if you will, of stages of proficiency in learning modern languages. And this is used by industries around the world when they're trying to assess what was the fluency, now the proficiency of a speaker, for example, in terms of what they can do in other countries around the world, at organizations, et cetera, et cetera. They give them what we call an oral proficiency interview, and that levels them on this pyramid. And when we, as we teach our students to function in modern languages, we also teach them about this pyramid. We want them to be able to understand, what makes a novice writer or speaker, what makes an intermediate. And there are sub-levels of each one of these larger categories. This is pretty high altitude. You know, and you can see in the green, the intermediate description, you see that intermediates create with a language. They can ask and answer simple questions on familiar topics and handle simple situations or transactions. And there's actually 5 sub-levels within that intermediate category. And that moves obviously up toward advanced when a speaker or a writer can narrate and jump time frames. Using various time frames in Spanish in particular is tricky. It takes a number of years of practice to develop the ability to jump between time frames within the tasks that we're giving our students. So this gives you an idea of sort of where we start with students. And then the other piece that I'll share is, as I move on to modes of communication, is just simply the days of teaching modern language where we would really, you know, compartmentalize teaching about, you know, the colors, the numbers, all of the sports that exist in the world, all of the activities that one might do on the weekend. It's really gone by the wayside years ago. And we understand that, you know, speakers and learners of language naturally cycle topics over and over again, whether that be family, what you do in your free time, your favorite foods, things that are familiar to you, all the way to the things that are least familiar to a student in the middle or high school at Catlin Gable, being, you know, political systems and what are the complicated issues that contribute to nations warring with one another and those types of things. So we think a lot about those tasks that we give them. We think a lot about cycling the same topics over and over year after year and allowing them to just grow their proficiency in that topic area as the years go on. And then I'll end my short time here in talking about modes of communication. We talk to students a lot about this. We're mindful as modern language teachers in the classroom that the students know what mode of communication they're working on at any given time. And you can see them here. The interpersonal really is what we know as conversation. It's listening and speaking, making sense of some auditory input and formulating a response and getting back to somebody in the immediate time frame. We work on interpretive listening and reading a ton. A note that's really important in our department is that we curate authentic language within our languages that are created by authentic speakers for authentic speakers versus the sort of plethora of resources that exist out there that, for lack of a better term, dumb down the language to try to bring it down to, say, a middle school level, for example. So we pull our materials from authentic text, which is a point of pride and something that's really important. And then finally, presentational listening and speaking, and our students are in one of these modes of communication at any given point as they're working on the language. Another note here, and please do put any questions that you have in the chat so we can address those in the end of our time here. Just another visual talking about the path to proficiency. Finally, this pyramid, this path to proficiency, this is the rubric or the roadmap for all of us in languages in general for our whole lives. There are not very many people that operate with any given frequency at the distinguished or the superior level of language. Most of us spend most of our time in the intermediate anyway. So what does that mean for a modern language student studying in the context of Catlin Gable? It means that it takes a long time for them to truly move through the intermediate level and start touching the advanced, you know, from topic to topic, task to task. So it's a long road and it is a hard road, and we want to give them the full story right off the bat. So with that, I will yield my time and thanks everyone.
All right, thank you, Spencer. Laura or Tien?
Yeah, Tien, did you want, I think Tien, your slides were next if you wanted to go ahead and present what you had. And Spencer, we might have you, we might give you the slide number and have you hop on that slide for Tien. I think slides, Tien, did you want to?
Tien, is that where you'd like me to start? Slide 10. Okay, sorry, I thought I was sharing still. Here we go.
Tian, you're muted, just so you know.
Sorry about that. So can you go back to the about Mandarin proficiency level, that slide?
Yes.
Yes, this one. Thank you. So Spencer just talked about that long path to go. And I want to mention that, especially Mandarin, the proficiency level development would take 2 more years to get to that same level like other language. So pretty much our about Chinese program in middle school, our 3 years goal is to support students to build solid foundation to novice high level. As you see, the novice high level, this foundation, it takes more time to build and to get to the next level. And what is the novice level? It's pretty much that when students get to this level, they should be able to communicate about their personal life, such as self-introduction, family, friends, daily routine, and school life in both the written and spoken and speaking. So a student also will start to learn asking questions in different scenario conversation, and also learn how to ask the following questions. Next slide, please. And I like to say that teacher in class, the role in classroom, actually teachers is pretty much that we switch it to the facilitator. It's not like a teacher and we are just standing there teaching. We actually provide that in our lesson, and then also we like to give students a lot of guiding structure and questions to make them to think, to talk about it, and also do some investigation. And then we will give the student most of the time to do independent study and also not study, learning, and also collaborate with other students. So it's pretty much like a process-based and experiential-based learning. And so students will develop building their own vocabulary and also apply the sentence structure that to create their conversation and in different scenario dialogue. So situation. So next, sorry, but I'm kind of nervous. Next one, I just want to give you some snapshot about what's happening in my class. I like kids that visualize that what they are thinking, and so that will help them to look at through the process that they actually really identify each thing that what they wanted to express, and they can also just go back to look at what they create, and they can talk. And through this process, it's not just about Chinese project or language purpose. I think that language is only the tools. We really look at children's development in our class, even in this language subject as a whole child development. So we like kids have to be able to organize their thinking. Also, kids can also be able to do things independently, and then also work with others. So there are a lot of skills that we try to make sure that kids would to build through this class learning. They can also using this language to talk about a lot of things they learned. So we also beside the project, so we also do the experiential learning that we do the pen pal with Chinese students too. So that's it. Okay, so Laura, it's your turn. Sorry about that.
No, that was perfect. Thank you, Tian. This will be our kind of last slide of our presentation, since we do want to make sure that we provide ample time for answering your questions. So this is just a slide that gives a bit of a snapshot of some of the resources that we use in the Spanish department. As Spencer said, we use, to every extent that we can, we use native resources that were created for native speakers. And you may ask, well, how do you use those when my student may be a novice or a beginner? corner. And the answer to that is that we really use resources that allow us to play with, certainly at the beginning levels, like in sixth and seventh grade Spanish. We use resources that allow us to manipulate the playback speed. So maybe we'll listen to something at 0.5 or 0.75 speed. We will listen to it with transcripts, like you can see in the top left-hand corner, Newsella is a great resource. Also some videos like the one in the bottom right with the little DW there in the corner, some YouTube videos, edpuzzles that allow us to watch things at slower speeds and really interact with the material as we're taking it in. We use Quizlet. Anyone who has students studying foreign language right now would probably be familiar with the fantastic online platform Quizlet, which helps both with speaking comprehension, vocabulary development, and also has some fun games that our students really love to play with and can kind of compete against each other sometimes and in teams. And yeah, just some other videos. I did want to provide a couple of current, actually this is from this year, just in the past couple days and weeks, projects that our 6th and 7th graders have done. You'll see on the bottom left, the sixth graders were drawing their own alebrijes to talk about Dia de los Muertos and also Mexican folklore and traditions. They designed their own alebrijes that were a combination of different animals that were native to Mexico, and then labeled them with parts of the body. So you can see, as Spencer was talking about, we're covering not only kind of cultural things like Mexican folklore, but also things like parts of the body, parts of an animal's body, color. And then the students were sharing that information with each other, and they were actually sharing the information blind with their partner. So they were describing their creature, and their classmates were listening and trying to replicate what they were hearing without seeing the visual support of their partner's image. So not only speaking, also listening, interpreting, and reacting, all kind of happening at the same time. And all the while students are speaking to be understood and listening to understand. A really great day for us in our language classes is a day when the teachers speak very little, and we just kind of set up a support environment where students can connect and interact with each other to the max. A couple other things that I'll just touch on really quickly. A lot of times what this looks like for students is speaking with some written supports at the beginning, or speaking with quite a few written supports, then moving on to speaking with limited written supports, and then up in 8th grade and beyond, speaking with little to no written supports. So on the top right there, the Todo Sobre Mi is a great little self-portrait that one of our students did to create a conversation and be able to ask respond to questions that are being asked about them and their own personal preferences. And then a popular project that we do in 7th grade Spanish is a haunted house tour, which you see in the bottom middle there with the pumpkin in Minecraft. Students are able to create their own haunted house using vocabulary around the home. And then they actually take us on a tour of their haunted house, be that we had students actually draw like haunted house models. We had some students created in Minecraft. And so we actually just presented that today. So this is hot off the presses. It's a lot of fun. Their classmates really interact with them and engage with them in a really fun and really fantastic way. So we just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of a snapshot about what a day in the life of a modern language student is. And I hope that we did that. And now we would welcome your questions and
yeah, thank you. I'll throw in my 2 cents here, as observing different language classes over the years at Catlin Gable, and a lot of the wonderful things that take place. Everything from, as Tien was mentioning, it's not just about language. Language is the vehicle to do so much more in their learning. And then also observing things like, some cultural aspects of cooking that's going on in classes. And just, it is a rich experience, and in many ways, very, very hands-on and just wonderful. So I'm going to moderate the questions. There's a question here that kind of talks about, like, what is it like to join the middle school language program? If you're joining in a 6th grade language class, or even if you're joining in a 7th or 8th grade language class, what is that like? What if I have no experience in the language, or very little experience, or what if the previous school I was at had, been taking the language my whole time. You know, what is that like? What is that like, that student experience like? And if you could just talk a little bit about, you know, maybe those different entry points, if you're a new student in 6th grade, or maybe even a 7th or 8th grader joining the language class.
Yeah, Ted, thanks. I'd be happy, Laura, Tian, if it's okay if I take this one. You know, over all of these years, I've taught 6th, 7th, 8th grade Spanish, and for the last 3 years, a Spanish 3 course in the upper school. And so I've seen a lot of different levels, and I've had every permutation of kids who have come from immersion programs, come into 6th grade and or 7th and or 8th grade Spanish. And I also, on the other end of the spectrum, have had students join all 3 levels of middle school, having had 0 Spanish language learning experience. And the big answer is they not only just survive, but they thrive in class. And I can't think of a time when a student who's had 0 language experience or very little joins a level in the middle school and doesn't have an incredibly productive year. Maybe it's in part a sink or swim reaction. Oh my gosh, people around me know so much, I have to work really hard. But the other side of it, and it's something that we pride ourselves on, is Laura's really spoke about it, so did Tian. We try to differentiate our learning to build proficiency in the classroom. And whether you're a complete beginner or you know, an upper novice speaker just coming into the intermediate, the tasks, the conversations, the projects, the writing, all of the things that we do, we expect students to be at their ceiling of proficiency on every task that we give them. So some kids are pushing into the intermediate, others at the novice. So there really is a place for everybody. And then lastly, I'll just say, if we have native speakers come into the middle school, we often encourage them to take another modern language, because that is the hardest situation to satisfy, is a native speaker who needs to be reading chapter books, watching movies, and doing that type of curriculum, which is above the difficulty level for sure of the huge majority of our middle school kids.
Thank you, Spencer. One note, I think you have screen sharing ability. If you could exit the screen share, then we can see all of our faces. Thank you. Laura, Tian, anything to add, or I have another question queued up as well.
I would like to add that even students started from 0, they join the class. It's okay because they start from 0, but the class would we're still learning the same topic, but then we set up the personal goal. Each one, they learn their own pace. And then when we do the project, then we will go through with students so they can choose what their goal and how much they're gonna do. So that's how we support them. So I don't think that's the difficult for kids to do. And also, we really see in the end of the course, we really see the students who start from 0, they're actually doing very well. So that's why I just want to add it.
Great, thank you. I'm curious if any of you have recommendations. Let's think about a student who's not a native speaker, but has taken language at their elementary school. Do you recommend that they continue that language, or is middle school a time for exploration maybe, and taking a different language, you know, as you were saying, Spencer, for native speakers, take a different language for their middle school years? Any thoughts on that question?
Spencer, I'll let you field that one. We'll let you field that one.
Okay, I would say a couple things. I want to be clear that in general, we encourage, if a 6th grader comes in Spanish or in Mandarin, we encourage them to stay in that language for the 3 years that they're in middle school. So to clear that up, we do not encourage students between 6th and 7th grade, 7th and 8th grade, jumping between languages to sample them to then move into the high school in one of those languages. But having said that, I personally have encouraged students to try studying other languages. Some of the fears about maybe they'll lose everything they learned in lower school, or it's all that study is for naught. A lot of that does not bear out in the research. We've had students study Spanish as a lower school outside of Catlin, come into the middle school at Catlin, study French, have a great 3 years of French, learn a bunch, go back into Spanish as a high school student, And whatever proficiency they think they might have lost comes back very, very quickly. So again, that's just kind of a piece of evidence there that doesn't bear out in the research.
Laura, anything to add since you were unmuting too?
No, that's perfect. And I just want to make sure we can answer as many questions as we want. So I think onward.
Great. There's a question here about what does assessment look like? I mean, are we taking a lot of just vocabulary quizzes? Are we doing projects? What does assessment of learning look like in your classes? And so there's an opportunity probably for each of you to share a little bit about what that looks like. So maybe Laura, I don't know, can we start with you?
Yeah, of course. I guess my answer to that is every assessment looks different, and assessments take different shapes as the students kind of continue on in their language learning journey. But what assessment usually looks like at an early 6th grade stage, for example, is one where they are given perhaps a series of questions ahead of time and also an audio where they can practice hearing that kind of question, and then they will have a one-on-one conversation with me in class while the other students are doing independent work. Then as we kind of move on and progress through 6th grade and on to 7th grade, the assessments are often verbal and have to do with them asking each other questions. In the beginning of 7th grade, it is like we're creating a script for what we anticipate our conversation will be. And then by the end of the year, they're usually able to spontaneously respond to things within familiar contexts. But there certainly is, there are written assessments that we do. And so, yeah, I guess all of the above, and it just kind of, it depends, but the goal is that the students become increasingly more independent with their language skills and increase their ability to spontaneously communicate. So our assessments reflect that.
Tian, would you like to go next?
Well, talking about assessment, I think that in the end, I would really want students who already did a lot of practices. So in the end, I want the kids to feel comfortable using the language to talk about themselves. So they can also write something what they are thinking. And so that's assessment. What it's pretty much will show their skills, and each kid would demonstrate that how much they learn. And then from there, the result of assessment, then we will to look at what's the next step for each student. So assessment, we are not grading them. We are actually helping them to see how they can improve for the next step and move forward. So that's our goal.
And I would just add and take us right back to the beginning, that proficiency pyramid that I showed you and explained at the beginning of our talk is what I use with the students, and I rate them on that proficiency pyramid repeatedly in their writing and in their speaking. So a typical assessment in my class in 8th grade would be something called an oral performance conversation. Kids would be together in a group of 2 or 3, and they would have a task. And an example of that task would be, you invite a friend to come do this thing, you make up that invitation, they ask you, a lot of questions about it. They got to get a ton of information. And then they say, you know what, I can't come. And I kind of impose this task structure on them to create difficulties within the language and elicit all kinds of types of, whether it be vocabulary, grammar structures, but really it's satisfying the task. And they spend a couple of weeks working up this conversation. They might write in support of it. They might do whatever. But when they do the conversation, it's with 0 notes. It's with 0 anything other than images if they wanted to use images to prompt their speaking. And then I rate them, and I rate them on the proficiency pyramid. And then in the background, as my colleague suggested, the way that I do vocab in 8th grade is they keep what's called a personal vocabulary list, and that list is a running list of phrases, verbs, conjugations. It can be anything really that come from the conversations that are having in class. Every kid's list is personalized to them because it's the words that they're tripping over in context while they're using the language in the classroom. It's not an imposed list. I don't say these are the 50 words that you have to memorize to regurgitate on a piece of paper. to then forget them the next day and never use them again. These are all words that they come across in their conversations. Some kids go, I want to do 35 words. I think I can memorize those. That's my quiz. Other kids say, I want to do 80 words. Other kids, I had a student today that took a 121 word vocabulary quiz because she just is like so into it and she's been collecting so much vocabulary. So those are a couple examples of assessment, and then also too with some differentiation embedded in there, that it's not the standard, vocabulary, the standard test 1 through 20, everybody does the exact same thing. We're looking for differentiation, people expressing themselves in different ways, but getting rated on that proficiency pyramid.
Great. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Tien. Thank you, Laura, our wonderful, representatives of our wonderful modern language department. And hope you learned a lot from them. And please feel free to reach out if you have more questions. And we're gonna now shift gears to our next department. So thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Tien. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
And now I would like to welcome our representatives from our middle school math department. And as they get logged in, I will reintroduce myself. For those of you who are just joining, my name is Ted Chen. I'm the head of the middle school. And tonight's session with our middle school math colleagues here, they'll introduce themselves. They'll show a little bit about their background, what they teach. They'll give a little bit of an overview about the philosophy and the curriculum, maybe goals of the department. And they'll talk a little bit about what happens in class. And as we get towards the end, we will have a little bit of Q&A opportunity. So please, if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat. And when we get to that time, I will moderate the Q&A session. And I guess without further ado, I will turn it over to our middle school math colleagues. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us. I am happy to share slides if that's okay with everyone. Yeah, okay. One moment. So welcome, we're very excited to share with you an overview of our middle school math program. And so we'll start with just quick introductions of the three of us who could be here. There's a fourth who's not able to join us tonight, but we'll do quick introductions, a general overview of the program, and we'll end with an example of a task in one of our algebra courses. And then finally, we'll have a Q&A for the last portion of the session.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Huang. I'm currently teaching the accelerated 6th grade math and the geometry course. I've been at Catlin Gables. This is my 6th year. Before that, I was teaching in New York City. I'm excited to welcome everyone and hope that our session today gives you enough information about our program. And then Lisa Lavelle is our other math teacher who isn't able to attend, but she also teaches Accelerated Math 7 and the algebra course.
And hi, everybody. I'm Dan Reinhardt, and I've been at Catlin for 3 years now, 3 interesting years. And I am currently your Algebra 1 and Algebra 1A teacher. And prior to this, I was teaching in Chicago and kind of all over the place, but mostly Chicago.
And I'm Alix Woodall. I teach Accelerated Math 6 with Michelle and Accelerated Math 7 with Lisa. This is also my 3rd year, and prior to Catlin, I was also teaching in New York. So we wanted to just start by sharing our math instructional philosophy for PS12 at Catlin. It really grounds the work that we do in our classrooms and really guides our instructional practices and what we really hope that students are walking away with after being with us in our program. And so we really do make intentional shifts in our classrooms to support students in becoming creative problem solvers and really teaching into that curiosity and perseverance, and then supporting them in their communication and collaboration with one another.
So this is just an overview of all the courses that we offer here, starting from 6th grade. So in 6th grade, all the students take 6th grade math, and then they move into 7th grade math. And what we find is that some students are able to take a full year of algebra, and some students need more support, so they would go into algebra 1A, and then would later either take algebra 1B in 9th grade, and some students also opt to do that over the summer before taking geometry in 9th grade. We also offer geometry currently in 8th grade. And then, so this is our general view of what is offered in our middle school. And then Algebra 2 and beyond will be in the upper school classes. And some of our students who are on that track sometimes take some of these classes in the upper school currently. And we do have students who are outliers that could be in 6th grade and taking other classes, but the majority of our students follow this track.
Oh, I'm up. Hi, everybody. I don't want to be the guy who reads that slide, so I'll let you kind of digest that for a second while I talk about our goals for middle school math. I think of this framework as sort of being a forked goal that prepares our kids for their future in mathematics, their academic future in mathematics through high school and into college and so forth, into a STEM field if that's the direction they choose to go. But also while developing the so-called soft skills that help them become just really strong problem solvers, regardless of the context that they find themselves operating within. And I think those are actually equally important goals in the way our program sees it. I guess, and to that end, I want to say that when we're building confidence, we are making mistakes, and mistakes I think of as sort of like the fuel that runs our classrooms. So the culture that we cultivate from 6th through 8th it is awesome to make mistakes. Mistakes are the entire reason we are here. If no one was making mistakes, why would we be in math class, right? So we get to let our guard down, and we get to feel sort of free to try things, to use our imagination, to engage skills that are sort of outside of what we traditionally conceive of mathematics or what's like welcome in the mathematical classroom, to sort of welcome in everybody that to participate in this practice of like discovering patterns and discovering the the meaning of X in the case of algebra. And a lot of that comes too by developing their skills, their habits, and their ability to collaborate with others. So almost everything in our classrooms is run through group work, through collaboration, through discussion, before they need to land their skills, on that all-important assessment. But that's sort of on the back end.
And so we'll spend a little bit of time on this slide just to share with you our current shift into illustrative mathematics. We currently have our 6th graders working with this curriculum. It's been really wonderful to see them engage with this inquiry-based learning. And so we'll share a little bit about the differences between problem-based curriculum and a more traditional setting. And then Michelle will share a little bit more about the standards of mathematical practices that are named in this slide. And so first, again, so to Dan's point, we spend a lot of time just really honing in on that positive and productive math mindset so that students really feel that they are successful in class and can be successful with hard work. And so we really do teach into that perseverance. The conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and application are sort of the three interconnected aspects of math proficiency that we focus on as a whole. We really do want to make sure that they're done all together and that certain parts aren't left out, because they really do support student success when they're done simultaneously. So students are engaging in the standards of mathematical practice, which again, Michelle will speak to in a moment. The active learning through non-routine problems is really where we see the shift between inquiry-based or problem-based curriculum and traditional curriculum. So students are really doing much of the learning through problem-solving tasks that might look different. And so we do start to shift the classroom experience from, and I can't take credit, by the way, for these graphics. This is all from the Illustrative Math website, but really shifting that experience from the teacher modeling how to do a problem and then the students practicing to posing a question to students and having them work individually and then together to sort of come up with conjectures. And then eventually we have discussions and we sort of support them in being able to synthesize their learning and formalize their understanding of concepts by the end of the lesson. And so it's been a really neat opportunity to see sort of that shift from traditional teacher and student roles to this inquiry-based instructional practice. You know, research shows that students really do internalize material better in this way, and the traditional model tends to support like short-term procedural fluency, but in the long run, we really do want to make sure that we're developing strong problem solvers who can work on their own and collaborate with one another. So this is a shift we've started with 6th grade, and we're looking forward to transitioning 7th and 8th next year.
But I do want to also add that our lower school is also currently using this curriculum as well. So to what Elise just said, we do have a rubric where we try to sort of engage our students in these 8 points. So we want to make sure that students are able to make sense of problems and solve them. We're trying to, you know, get them to not feel like they are becoming like a calculator, right? Like we want them to be problem solver, and that memorization is not something that we encourage, and we want students to understand where those answers are coming from. And so you know, I like to say in my classroom, like, I'm not looking for the answer, and I want to see the process in which you are getting to that answer. And part of that is building a community where they can see how many different ways other people are getting to the same answer, but that there's just not one way of doing that. And that's why this rubric is really important for us to look at with our students, so that they can be able to like reason abstractly and quantitatively. And you know, and some of these are, I'm not going to read all of them, but these are basically what we look to in all the tasks that we do in the classroom and assessment that we create. Pause.
Oh no, I might have some PTSD from this problem. I just taught this last week. So I'm going to walk you through just an example problem that I've taught for the last 3 years, and I've been iterating on and developing some different sort of approaches towards. And this is something you literally would see in my class. So one of my classes has done this year. 2 of them have not. If you're connected in any way to any of my learners, I need to swear you to secrecy if you figured this out right now. But this is called the trestle problem. Oh. And so basically there is a person who is caught in the 4/7 of the way across a train bridge, a trestle bridge, and he needs to make a very important decision. He needs to run towards the train, which is a shorter distance, or away from the train, which is a longer distance, but obviously away from the train. And all we have here is the speed of the person. We are not given the speed of the train, and we are not given the location of the train when the problem begins. So there's a lot of missing information. And to role play here for a minute, a typical response might be, I can't solve this. You're trying to trick me. I have to know where the train is. There's sort of like there's the 7 stages of grief. There's sort of like the 7 stages of encountering a difficult novel problem. This typically takes about 2 days. And the first day is really just breaking the crust on this problem, interacting with our peers, spitballing some ideas, and just digging into it. So model, solve, explain. This problem is one of just a suite of really rich problems I enjoy using because, sort of to use like the parlance of our times here, it has a low floor and a high ceiling. There are a ton of different ways that students can begin to engage this problem, and there's even more ways that they can actually offer and represent and explain a solution to it. And then there is also sort of a gold standard, elegant algebraic expression of this, actually more than one. So students from all different levels, regardless of how we group them, can find purchase in the interest of this problem. And I'll show you some of their work in a second, but can I see the next slide? Leaks. Thank you. Okay, so I know you have a long road to hoe here tonight with this webinar, so I won't get too into the weeds here, but this is the rubric that Callan has developed for scoring problems like this. And I just want to draw your attention to the fact that of the 3 categories that we're assessing them on, understanding, mathematical correctness, and communication, one of those might feel the most traditional, right? Mathematical correctness. And there's a lot of rigor there, and we expect students to land on a defensible answer prior to even asking a teacher to check or verify that. But we're also evaluating these other skills, like how are they demonstrating their thought process, their ability to communicate these complex ideas, how are they connecting them possibly to even other subjects or experiences, and then how are they working within a group possibly, although eventually usually landing this individually, but using their networks, using other people's brains and their expressive abilities to really, I guess, amplify their knowledge of this problem and to get even deeper than they would if they had just sat there silently at a desk and been asked to deliver an answer. So to that end, I'm going to walk you through one quick example. And to be perfectly honest with you, I have a whole trove of prior student work. I picked the first one, and you'll know why in a second. So we can keep going. Okay, so this student slideshow, I won't spend too long on all these, but first they're asked just to restate the problem. Okay, so there it is. They need to restate it, typically in their own words. I think that's maybe on the next slide, though. We can keep going. Right, okay. So here we see that, yeah, there it is. So there they need to sort of start by, no, you're doing great, Alex. It's like the magician and the lady with like her head and her legs in the separate boxes.
It's delayed. I don't know what's going on. Okay, continue.
But here, our initial entree, amuse-bouche, if you will, into this problem is students need to just spend some time working with the language and restating this in a way that makes sense to them and verifying that everyone is on the same page, everyone actually understands what this problem is asking. And then as we move forward, this is a high-flying group. So they tried, if memory serves, they tried to get right into algebraic modeling. That's not necessarily typical in October, which is when this problem typically lands. It's coming, right, Alex? There it is. Voila. But they were go-getters. So they didn't set up tables. They didn't necessarily start with pictures. They actually wanted to start establishing variables for what they knew and didn't know in the problem, or constants for what they knew, variables for what they didn't in various rates, and start experimenting algebraically, which is always impressive and fun. Whether they got there or not, we'll see. You can keep going. So here we have them just rigorously documenting everything that they tried. So they are defining all these variables. Now I can tell you as an algebra teacher, and I know a bunch of you out there are like, it looks impossible to solve this. There are too many variables. But they declare their strategy. They spend time crafting the English to convey what they're trying to do, and then they're showing me the math. And they're continuing to show me the math here, yep. So here I get to check their procedural fluency. I get to dig into the granularity of their thinking and their computational ability, but I also get to see that high altitude stuff. And if you remember as a math student, sometimes your understanding didn't match your computational ability and vice versa. So by demanding that they offer both sides of their approach to the problems that we do, I get to understand the relationship. Is this kid someone who gets it, but needs work on the algebra side of this, the computational side of this? Or is this someone who's put a lot of practice into the computational side, but isn't quite grasping the abstract nature of what we're trying to do? All right, I'm ready. I think we're almost there. Okay, so here we're presenting the final solution. They're using, words and numbers together. Hopefully by October, they're not asking me why we're writing in math class anymore. That, and especially thanks to my colleagues in 6th and 7th grade, they're just habituated to this type of work, that everything involves all parts of their brain all the time. We can go, I think, to the last one, if I'm right, Alex. Maybe I should, oh. Is that it? Oh, sorry. Okay. The last thing I wanted to say, sorry, there's just one more thing I want to say. This is just our normal seamless perfection as a mathematical unit on display. What I wanted to say is this answer is totally wrong. They did not get to the correct answer. They got wonderful grades. They presented. This ended up in something that we might call, a Socratic dialogue in other classes being presented alongside. And eventually the class, not so much votes, but just discusses into consensus. So this group tried, they did exactly what I wanted them to do. They did not actually get a correct answer. But in the end, our class all celebrated together by finding the correct answer together and validating it and checking it together. So I thought this would just be a fun example to see how much work we put into being wrong sometimes, because that's just an authentic sort of peek into what happens, into how the proverbial sausage is made sometimes. Oh, there's a little man visiting you. Hi, buddy.
All right, well, I want to thank Alix, Michelle, and Dan for walking us through who they are, the little bit of an overview of the philosophy, the curriculum, and some of the goals, and then the example of the trestle problem, which I'm still wrapping my brain around right now. Alix, do you mind actually stopping the screen share so we can see everybody's face, and then we'll do a little Q&A. So I'm curious a little bit. The Common Core standards are out there. How does our math program align with Common Core? Hi, Frank.
I can speak to that, Ted. So the curriculum that we are using and will continue to use next year, the Illustrative Math curriculum I was speaking about, is both aligned to the standards of mathematical practice and the Common Core standards. And so both courses are accelerated, meaning that we cover 6th through 8th grade material in 2 years. And so our 6th grade course covers 6th and 7th grade standards, and then our 7th grade course covers the second half of the 7th grade standards and the 8th grade standards. And our hope is that by the end of those 2 years, we have a really strong understanding of those Common Core standards so that they have a strong foundation before they meet Dan in algebra.
Question about the trestle problem. Is that for 6th grade kids, 7th grade kids, 8th grade kids? Who's engaging in the trestle?
So that particular example is from last year's 7th grade algebra class.
Great, thank you. Here's a question. So the trestle problem is a great example. Are students taking tests still? What does assessment look like besides, the trestle problem where we're celebrating making mistakes and figuring out those pieces? So we could speak to that for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math.
I can start.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Okay, so I can start for 6th graders and then we can move our way up. I think we are still testing our students. Depending on the classes, the testing might look a little different. I think in 6th grade, a lot of our students are still getting used to being tested and getting time tests. That is a thing. They will have to finish the test in a certain amount of time. We often start the year without actually putting grades on their tests. We give them lots of comments and feedback. We have for many years talked about mastery assessments so that students are assessed on whether they mastered the skill versus whether they got it right or wrong, right? We are trying to steer away from students just looking at a score and telling and looking at it and say, I got the right answer and moving on. But even with the right answer, there's still work to be done. There is like, how are you showing evidence of learning? How are you showing that you use the skills that we got talked about in class in order to solve this problem versus just randomly picking any process? And so that's in 6th grade. And then should I move on from 6th grade?
Yeah. In 7th, again, a lot of that translates to the work that we're doing in 7th grade. There's a combination of summative and formative assessments, and we're responding to data all of the time, and really making sure that our instruction is meeting the needs of our students. Students are also taking their assessments and using time in class or as in homework to evaluate their errors and sort of think about misconceptions and be able to articulate the type of misconception and redo the problem. And so we're really trying to close the loop with kids so that assessments really do have they're informative for both us and for the kids. And so we really try to build that in as much as we can in 7th grade.
Hi, I apologize if any of this is redundant. I'm in a sort of a kinetic environment down here in the Peloton room. I know better. Yeah, in 8th grade, we do, a lot of my math background is fairly traditional, and I'm learning new terrain and, putting a lot of energy into that. So we'll do sort of a traditional assessment cycle that provides data, numbers, scores, if you will. And then there'll always be sort of an inquiry component as well, or project component or representative component that attends to that. And those are evaluated together in person with the student every time. So I don't know if Alex or Michelle talked to the assessment cycle, but it's a very intensive process. I mean, you don't go in and take a test and then leave and then get your, your score back, your raw score back later. It takes, no exaggeration, probably about 2 weeks. Because we're also, having them do corrections, having them work together on assessing like common student errors and sources for those, asking to demonstrate their knowledge after the fact. So then I'll kind of write a couture assessment for the cavalry is here. So then I'll write, a different assessment for each kid based on what they struggled with on the exam. So they get like a follow-up opportunity to show mastery.
I just want to look at it.
Thank you. How do you encourage middle school girls to feel confident about their math abilities? And for, attached to that, yeah, middle school girls and students, just confidence in math.
Yeah, I can start with the reason why I really love the new curriculum that we're adopting is that I find it very equitable in terms of access, and that because of the way the questions are asked, like there is a sort of a consensus that there isn't one right answer, and that there are multiple answers in many ways. And I think that I've seen that has built a lot of confidence in our girls, especially those who don't like to speak up all the time, but feeling now like, because we've been doing it for a month, feeling very confident to share that answer because they know that there isn't one right answer, that they're not just sitting there waiting for that kid in the room that always speak up, that know the right answer, that always has their hand up. And so that is, a culture that we're shifting, and we're intentional about choosing this curriculum because we are intentional about who is constantly raising our hand and making our classroom more equitable in terms of access.
Does the school participate in middle school math competitions like Math Counts, AMC 8? I can feel the AMC 8 piece, for example. We have a activity that takes place after school called Mathletes, and it's a group of students who can opt in to participate, and the Mathletes register for AMC 8. And I actually was in the process of registering them earlier. So we do participate in those types of opportunities. We also have Math Olympiads as another opportunity outside of math class, which allows students to opt in to do some more math, and math Olympiads is typically our 6th graders, whereas the mathletes are 6th, 7th, or 8th graders in the middle school. So I want to pause here and just thank our 3 math colleagues, Dan, Michelle, and Alix. Thank you so much for sharing about yourselves, sharing about your curriculum, and giving examples and answering questions. You know, please do, again, if you have future questions about our math program, please do reach out. And with that, Dan, Michelle, Alix, have a good rest of your evening, and we will get our next department queued up.